हेलो एन्ड नमस्ते सबैजनालाई वेलकम टु नेपाली कोड ल्याब्स। आज चाहिँ म मोक इन्टरभ्यूको एपिसोड 2 लिएर आएको छु। आजको एपिसोडमा चाहिँ मैले ग्रुप अफ इन्टरभ्युअरहरूसँग दिएको मोक इन्टरभ्यू लिएर आएको छु। सो विदाउट एनी डिले लेट्स गेट स्टार्टेड। हेलो, Dipen here.
Hey, Dipen, how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Marty. Marty, right? Am I pronouncing it right?
Yes. My name is Marty Wolcott. I'm the product owner for the team. So, where are you reaching us from, Dipen?
So currently I'm in Denver.
Thanks. How are things in Denver?
Yeah, I just came yesterday because I have to catch up some things over here, so I just came over here this weekend. But permanently I'm located in Chicago.
A visit for you, huh?
Yeah.
So, Dipen, you and I met last week, enjoyed our conversation. So wanted to have you get together with the team, let the team talk to you and, hear about your background and, kind of give you the lay of the land from their perspective. So this is some of the developers on the team, and then Marty's the product owner. So why don't you go ahead and kind of kick us off by giving them kind of an overview of who you are and what you've been up to?
Yeah, sure, definitely. Yeah. So I'm Dipen here, and I have completed my master's degree in computer science from Maharishi University, Iowa. And I have been developing applications, and I've been into software development for past 6 years. And I have been developing microservices, more scalable, manageable cloud services based on Spring Boot Java. And depending on the project, I am working with relational database and no relational database. Mostly worked with the Postgres, Oracle, and for NoSQL, I have worked with DynamoDB, AWS DynamoDB, and also something called it's not that popular around most of the industry, but it's called Mark Logic, I think. So I think that something like that is there. So it's not that popular, but it's I am familiar with that NoSQL database because of the transactional property it supports. I worked in one of the projects, so that's one thing. And talking about cloud infrastructure, I'm familiar with AWS, Pivotal Cloud, and also Google Cloud. For Google Cloud, I have used it for big queries and such stuff. Not the deployment purpose, but for big queries and those that storing the data thing over the cloud. But with AWS, I'm familiar with SQS, SNS, and all of those stuff, and also deployment things over there. And Pivotal, it's totally like developer. I feel like it's more developer friendly cloud infrastructure. That's help us to deploy application quickly into cloud, and it also provides few supports that Spring Boot provides by itself. So it's much more easy to integrate with the Spring Boot and the Pivotal cloud of thing. So overall, I would say and I also have experience with React for front-end development. So I'm kind of full stack developer. Depending on the requirement, I can switch between front-end and back-end. So that's about me. And if you want to know more about my projects and things, I can definitely go forward with that.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and just kick off the questions. Like I said, I'm the product owner, so the other folks will probably ask you more technical questions, and I'll give you the soft ones. But I know you've worked a bit for some clients of ours. We're in healthcare as well, and so you just sort of tell me a little bit about your experience through the healthcare applications and the development that you've done in that space.
So basically, I have worked with two healthcare projects, one based on Chicago and one based in Florida itself. So the project that I worked in Chicago was morely focused on membership side and not more on the claims side. So mostly managing the member information. And since we were kind of focusing on mobile applications, instead of writing a legacy API, we were kind of writing an application and using a Gemfire geode to store much of the information in the in memory storage, so that the retrieval of the information will be so quick, and you don't want be having that latency, facing that latency, and we don't have to um, communicate, go through a lot of networks. Like if like request comes in, it comes to our server, then it goes to our database, right? A lot of network calls and a lot of processing going in there. But with Geode, we completely cut off the call to the database, and we store everything in memory. And it was around a cluster was around 21 GB of memory we were storing in a single cluster, and everything was stored in memory, because we want to avoid that latency, and we want to support the mobile experience in a seamless way. So we came up with that design. So basically, that was the first project I worked with. Um, BCBS uh, on Chicago side, and with again in FloatW. Second project is with FloatW. Mostly, it's depending. It's more about claim processing rather than membership side. I am much more focused in the claims processing side, basically something like that. I cannot get like talk about much more detail logic over there, right? But overall, that's the thing, just claim processing. And here using microservice architecture, distributing the like functionality. Let's say if we want to basically, let's say, I will say in much higher level, let's say if we have a medical record or kind of thing, we write a dedicated microservice based on that only, so that we don't mix up multiple things together, right? Let's say one service for medical records, one service for claim processing, one service for payments and reviews kind of thing. So that we have that dedicated services, and it can be reutilized by other system except our system. So we are designing the system in that way for claim processing. And all
Thank
of the
you very
things,
much.
yeah, and all of the things happens in agile way. So all the grooming happens, we discuss about the stories, things like that, right? And all the like agile function and ceremony we do to like come up with these stories and features, something like that.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to Nan, Alex, and Luis. You guys, what kind of questions do you have?
I will pick up the questions. Hey, hi. So I saw that you have some experience working with Java in general, but I also saw that you have Kotlin as well. So I guessing you was working with Android in the Android environment, or you was using that for the backends in your projects?
So professionally, I have only done one project with Kotlin, and that was with Spring Boot and Kotlin. The whole Spring Boot project was written in Kotlin.
Can you tell me about your background in Java?
With Java, I have extensively worked with Java 8 and Java 11, depending on projects, but mostly in Java 8, because most of the application are still with Java 8. So mostly with Java 8, and I have experience with using like streams, and even with Java 11, I have tried some reactive approach of doing things, but um, mostly I have not seen that much of extensive use of reactive frameworks or implementation in most of the project. But I have personally worked on reactive frameworks and projects by myself, personally, for my personal interest only kind of thing.
Okay, perfect. Are you familiar with the design patterns?
Design patterns, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Can you mention one or two that you mostly use on the daily work?
So mostly we use singleton design pattern, factory design pattern, and command design pattern, depending on the project. Basically, if we are using React, I will say it's a command pattern where we use that preserve state, and provide some actions. So yeah, that's the design pattern. Mostly I'm familiar with and using in almost our projects.
And you describe the best approach to implementing the singleton pattern on Java, and the most common usage.
So the most most efficient way, like the way we defined a singleton class is to define our constructor as private so that it cannot be instantiated, right? And we will provide a helper method that will help to instantiate the method, like the object for first time if it is not instantiated, but if it is already instantiated, we return the already created object. And there is a high chance of like sometimes if in a multi-threaded environment, there is a chance of like there is a chance like where there might be multiple instance created, so that's why we wrap it around a synchronized block so that only one thread can access it at a time, and only one object of that singleton class exists in our whole project or application.
Perfect. So I thought one more question. So Java was an attempt to improve C++, right? So one was the problem that C++ has was multi-herency problems. So how Java fixed that problem? How Java implement the multi-herency problem?
If I understand your question, we are talking about multi-inheritance problem, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I was also a little bit confused there. Like, so basically, Java, especially I'll say like Java classes cannot be multiple. Like we cannot inherit in Java multiple classes at a single time, but we can inherit uh, interfaces, I will say. Okay, but the main problem why we Java prevented that was because of the diamond problem. And if the diamond problem exists if like a single class, a child class inherits its parents, and its parents has the same method name, and then it will create a confusion which method to invoke for in the child class. So to prevent that, like we like Java provided interface, like we can inherit multiple interfaces. And also with interface now, Java has come up with the default method with the new implementation, right? And that helps us to even define a default method for like default method and default implementation for each scenario, I would say. If I'm clear
Okay.
on that one.
Yeah, it's perfect. That's what I was looking for. So, so part of our job is so it's maintain a big, huge monolithic system. We use Splunk for handle the logging. Are you familiar with Splunk?
So I have not like worked with Splunk recently, but I have some familiarity with Splunk.
Okay. Are you familiar with reflection in Java as well?
I haven't used that much, but for testing purpose, I use it reflection because of the security reasons, right? I don't prefer to write reflection by myself until and unless the framework provides it. But for testing, we writing unit test cases and testing purposes, I do reflection to inject values, kind of things on the object or class itself.
Okay. Another question is also part of our job is, like I mentioned, is maintaining monitoring big monolithic system. So we need some skills on Linux to take a look directly to the logs or use profilers. You have some background using profilers, have some experience with using profilers and Linux in general.
I have some familiarity, but most like I also used to work with PHP, so I have kind of knowledge with checking logs and things. But maybe depending on your configuration, you might have to like groom me to that way. But I can definitely catch up because I have familiarity with Linux.
How in your projects you normally look for memory leaks or other memory issues? So what tools you use for that?
So basically nowadays I use Java Melody. Basically what I do is use that dependency in our code, and let's say if the application is deployed and once we grow and open the chart, right, and if there is a huge spike in memory and the memory is not like cleaning up as expected, right, and garbage collection is not unable to collect all those things, and it's still the memory is speaking kind of thing. I feel like there is some issue. So kind of I to see the memory leaks, I go in that way. And also what I do is look into the threads, which thread is consuming so much memory, and whether like it's our logical problem, right, or whatever we have written that's causing that problem, or something else is causing the problem. So that's how I try to find the memory leaks and look using the Java melody like dependency that we inject in our project, and using its dashboard. That's only the way I am using nowadays, because it's much more easy. We don't have to do much more installation, and it ships with the project itself.
Okay. As you mentioned that you was working with Java 11, I guess you are familiar with the functional programming. So you usually extensively in your projects, or you just use casually for handle streams and stuff like that?
Can you repeat the question? I didn't quite get it.
But so I guess that you are familiar with the functional programming.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So because you mentioned that you work with Java JDK 11,
Mm-hmm.
8. So how you use it extensively in your application, or you usually casually for example, handle it a list of streams or objects, or map those objects in different one, stuff like that. What's your experience working with the functional?
So for functional programming, yeah, like you said, I extensively use with streams, but I try to extract out the logic as a function, so that we can pass it to the streams, and it can be tested independently. So that's my approach. But like I said, I have a like concept of pure functional program, right? Pure functions, but I will say in my projects, I don't focus to create a pure functions, because that's too much technical thing, right? Sometimes it's kind of difficult to achieve also. But I try to use function, extract the create a functions and pass it to the stream, so that it's much more easy to test it individually, because testing stream is sometimes a little bit harder, right? And if you can extract the functions, a functional component out, and test that thing, then it's more testable and easy to debug. So I prefer in that way. And yeah, I do try to do that in my projects if that's possible.
It's good. Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you. So I don't have any other questions. So maybe Alex, you can, or Nan, you can add more questions.
Yeah, sure thing.
Mm-hmm.
Let me try to put my cam on. Sorry about that. Hey, how are you doing?
Yeah, doing good, Alex.
This is Alex.
Yeah.
Luis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, you can come here.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. Thanks. So just, I was checking your CV.
Mm-hmm.
Have done very interesting things, I would say. So I would like to know something about what is in your CV only.
Mm-hmm.
But there is no like a right or wrong answer. I just want to know, how do you achieve some of the things I see? What do you think about that kind of design? I see you have a lot of experience with microservices, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So tell me one thing. Let's suppose I have my microservices stuff, right? My architecture is done.
Mm-hmm.
So I have my service A that calls my service B, and my service B that is calling my service C, right? For the same reason, A and C has kind of communication, right?
Yeah.
So how does, if I for some reason my service C just get down, how does the service A will get to know without jumping across B? Is there any way to just get to know? How would you implement that kind of architecture? Yeah.
Okay. So I have implemented.
And just tell me if you have question or something that I wasn't pretty clear. You just ask questions you need. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, how do we know like some system is down within our whole mess of microservices, right? So if that's my understanding is correct, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
But
basically,
in my architecture,
uh-huh.
my microservices,
Mm-hmm.
right, I have this kind of latency between A, B, and C.
See, yeah.
But I just want A,
Mm-hmm.
which is working by itself
Mm-hmm.
without being concerned about around. And if something fails, it doesn't have to go all the way, all the services, because I need it to know without checking on all the different services we have.
And like in this architecture, is there like a centralized place where we maintain like kind of health check kind of thing, or it's in is service specific, like we don't maintain any centralized service to check the health of these applications?
When you say centralized, what do you mean?
So basically, let's say I will say like a gateway kind of thing, right? Where it maintains the gateway maintains the health of another, like all the status of all the connected microservices, and based on the health check, right? It gives us that information beforehand, so we don't have to like go from A to B to C, but depending on our architecture, how we want to like extract those information on the gateway or not does matter. But yeah, I'll say that can be one approach we can do. Otherwise,
So let's suppose we have our API gateway in my architecture, but my API gateway will just me as a service let me register, right? But I don't want to go to my API gateway to get to know another service is failing. I would like just to be working as an independent service, because this is a microservice in the, like a architecture. Just wondering if there is something that you have faced before, and how do you solve it?
So basically, it's kind of challenging a problem, right? If I don't want to go to some
Yeah,
centralized
sorry
hub,
about
yeah, if I don't want to go to some or utilize that functionality, mm, I will say like I will go with some fallback mechanism that will return me the default values, and somehow I can the service that's reading me knows like it's not a permanent or desired result, but it's some permanent or transient kind of result, so that uh, it can operate without breaking the whole the system getting down. I will say because we don't have the direct communication, it's difficult to see, to go and see like whether the service is down. But still, if the service is down, if we have some fallback mechanism in microservice B, that might help us to like at least prevent breaking the whole system, but uh, operate in partial or some temporary way kind of thing, I will say.
Is there any tool or framework that you have used for doing this kind of?
Yep, I have used that circuit breakers and kind of things with the Spring Boot, so that it will fall back to the secondary of implementation. And let's say, for example, in my case, if I should be returning a list of users and somehow I'm unable to communicate to the service C, right? I will at least return an empty array with a there is one HTTP code. I exactly that is not in my head, but it will say it's partial result, and some that's how like the consuming service knows like something is not working as perfectly, but it's just returning a partial value so that the application won't break.
All right. But when I say framework tools, did you already use any tools specific, like in order to get to know when services are down, that maybe is in your CV that you recall?
So basically, I have used Eureka and Ribbon kind of thing, but it's kind of outdated for now because of that no more support. I think there is something called Spring Gateway, but in recent project, we are like I haven't written down that kind of gateway and Ribbon kind of thing, because most of the things are handled by gateways itself. So I have not written that implementation recently, but previously I have done that.
All right. And I see then you said that you have experience with Spring Boot, right? Which I will say is pretty similar to a Spring framework, but there are two different frameworks as well. So if I wanted to know like which one, just by looking to the application, which one is my Spring framework application and which one is my Spring Boot application, do you know how can I get to know, oh, this is my Spring Boot application?
So basically, with Spring, we don't have that startup property kind of thing. So for Spring, there is no deployment server built in the application, right? So Spring is a plain kind of a framework, and somehow we have to deploy it into the server. But with the Spring Boot, what it enables us is to not only write the framework and code, but also it helps us to deploy those things within the container or whatever container we prefer. So let's say whether it's a Tomcat server or JT server, right? It's comes with that in pack kind of thing. But rest of the things, the dependency mapping based on our choice, whether we want to go with annotation based or XML based, we can have both of those configuration in our both projects.
But the Spring framework, you can do annotation same, right? And even in Spring Boot, if I want to just take off the embedded Tomcat or whatever they have, it's also still possible. So in somehow I can reach the stage when both application will seemingly be the same, but they are not. So is there something that Spring Boot application tell me, hey, this is Spring Boot, it's not a Spring framework, something that you can count just
on top of my head, like that's the difference, right? And maybe the class path scanning might be the way, but I am also not sure on that one. But yeah, I think I'm not sure on that one exactly to differentiate that exact point. But I will say like maybe the class path scanning thing, that with the annotation thing might be the thing, but yeah, I'm not sure because I'm not 100% on that one. But yeah, I think that might be the
yeah. Can be confused. Yeah, that's true. Oh yeah, I'll say the last one. Just to see in the UI, you have good experience. Is that like you have good experience with React UI?
Yeah.
You feel confident?
Yeah.
So in React, we have something called props.
Yep.
I don't know if you remember that part. How would you explain props?
So I will say props is a way to communicate between our parent component and the child component. Whenever, let's say, a parent component has to pass its information to the child component, that's the way we that's the way to directly pass your information to child components. And you can pass the props as much as you can nest along like multiple child children, but you can still pass those props along the components. I would say that's my understanding on the props.
Correct. Yeah, that's a pretty good definition, I would say. So I would like actually say, as for your kind of day-to-day job in your current position, percentage ways, how much do you code? How much do you attend meetings? How much do you design? What is your day by day job
So
duties right now?
So talking about like we want to know more about my day-to-day activities, how I spend my day, right? If I understood you correctly.
Well, I don't know. Are you coding daily? So I would say my example. So I have days that I will spend on my day just coding. I have days that I will spend my day just checking logs or maybe in meetings. I can vary it differently. So my only question is, in your current position, how much exposure you have a code, meetings? What is your day-to-day activities?
So depending on the day and sometimes like depending on the situation of the project, mostly I am involved in coding and design discussion and like how technically we can approach some like problem we have found out and how to lay out those things. Mostly those are my core time that I give into, right? But depending on the requirement, like let's say if I have to perform much more discussion, depending on the requirement, it's mostly with devs and leads, not with the products and business, but I tend to do a lot of meetings, help with colleagues, have discussion with colleagues, because I feel like instead of chatting or shooting email, just jumping in the call, having that discussion, having that clear understanding from both sides is much more important than just like shooting out emails and kind of thing. So I'm kind of like jump in the call, solve the issue, and like you can continue with whatever your understanding kind of guy. So if required, I can jump in calls with tips and things like that. But mostly, I am into coding, designing things, even sometimes if required, drawing diagrams to clear out things and preserving those kind of stuff. Creating postman collections and creating it, like depending on scenario, right? Scenario based collections kind of thing, so that it can be tested easily next time kind of thing. So mostly engage in coding activities, but yeah, depending on requirements and all the scrum ceremony, I get it to calls. Yeah, that's only the thing that I happen like in my day.
Now I was talking mute. That's so nice. Yeah, thank you. I think then Mart is going to be the quick one.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in again, and I got to kick us off. Maybe I'll close this out here. I noticed that you've got. I was reading in your bio from the recruiting easy for me to say, recruiting company, that you are experienced with them. You've worked a number of positions with them. I look at your resume and I see a lot of contract work. Do you prefer contract work? Are you interested in maybe a position that's a little bit longer with a particular company, or do you like sort of the change and the moving from role to role?
So currently I'm looking into like something permanent, because the situation was not that like situation rolled out differently. So sometimes it was by my choice, sometimes it was not by my choice. Like I hopped into project, right? So I think I'm looking into something long term and stable kind of thing also. So that's why I think my resume, it seems like a long jump, but in with my contracting company, I'm still with them for like 2-3 more than years kind of thing. And with the tech system, it's more than a year, like kind of thing. So yeah, if things are there and things are looks good, I'm definitely looking for long term kind of thing also.
Okay. Just in the general team environment, how do you? Well, actually, let me ask two parts of this question. Obviously, this is a remote position. I imagine you've worked in several remote positions based on sort of the different things that you've worked on. How do you work remotely? What does your day look like? How do you try to organize your day so that you are efficient and effective while working remotely?
So first of all, like most of the productive tips I use is I don't check email early in the morning. That's the email is my like least prior thing. So if you are kind of more based on emails, then definitely you will get my reply late or something like that. But if you if like my day starts with like what are the pending thing that's remaining kind of thing, or anything that I continue to work from whatever I left yesterday kind of thing, and joining all the ceremonies, like stand up kind of thing, communicating with team members, and joining design discussion session kind of things. But yeah, mostly start with whatever kind of is pending, and then later in the day, or depending on the time, in the middle I just check email randomly, not that much also. And even I don't check the email notification. But if you like team member suits me in Teams, then definitely I can jump into calls, because like I said, I'm more kind of get in call, understand the problem, solve the problem that kind of guy, right? Instead of shooting email and doing kind of things. So yeah, I think that's how I organize my things basically. And my problem is like I kind of try to get in calls and solve the problem. So you will be like, you can easily get my replies back on my Teams, if or any communication platform we use.
Yeah, there are a number of folks that prefer Teams and calls to email. Email's going away, man. Everybody I know prefers Teams. But it refreshed my memory. What time zone are you in? Where are you at right now? Or not right now, but just where do you live and do most of your work from?
So I'll be working from Chicago Central Time Zone.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're Central Time.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of hours do you typically like to work? What's your preference? But I will say several of us are on Eastern Time Zone. A few of us are on Central Time Zone. So go ahead.
So till now, I usually join the Eastern Time Zone thing, but depending, like if it's not a mandatory thing and if the meetings are late, I can definitely start with whatever time Central Time Zone would be preferable. But usually I join in Eastern Time Zone. So most of the meetings are at the early morning kind of thing. So I try to follow the same thing for Eastern Time.
All right. Does anybody else have any other questions? Anything to share with Dipen and before we go about our ways? Thank you, Dipen. I appreciate your time. We're gonna have to, get together, talk amongst ourselves, and I imagine that Ryan and our team will, be reaching out to either you or your team pretty soon, and sort of see what the next steps will be.
Sure, yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you all for your time, and thank you so much, and talk to you later.
Thank you. Enjoy Denver.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
सो आजको लागि यति नै. यदि तपाईहरुलाई यो भिडियो मन पर्यो भने भिडियोलाई लाइक गरिदिनु होला, च्यानललाई सब्स्क्राइब गरिदिनु होला र म यस्तै कन्टेन्ट लिएर फेरि आउने नै छु. Until then, see you next time.